Justice William Atuguba. Good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. First off, and I know that you've been following how things are playing out with respect to the concerns that the NDC has raised about the errors identified in the provisional register that was exhibited. Other political parties have also aligned with those concerns. The Electoral Commission says, well, they've also identified those errors, but they have corrected them. So really, there's no need for an audit. Where do we go from here?
Well, the final word purports to be that the corrections have been made, and that's the end of it. The matter ends there, as I understand what your briefing.
Yes, essentially, they say that, well, because they have done those corrections, there is really no need for an audit, even though the NDC says that they have not seen the corrections that the Electoral Commission is saying they have done to the errors, as a matter of fact.
That looks very absurd to me, and I don't intend to be abusive, but to make the point very forcefully, I think it's dictatorial to take that posture, because the Constitution gives them the power, but that power is circumscribed by other provisions of the Constitution. Let's look at their powers briefly, just the relevant parts. The 45 clauses A and D are as follows. The Electoral Commission shall have the following functions: A, to compile the register of voters and revise it at such periods as may be determined by law. D, to educate the people on the electoral process and its purpose. Let's even pause here a bit. Is that proper education? Just to tell people who have pointed out grievances, which you have acknowledged exist, and then after that you say that's the end. We've effected the correction. They have not seen them, and that's the end of it. Is that proper education of the people on the electoral process and its purpose? I mean, to have blind trust in the mere ipse dixit of the Electoral Commission. I say, because that said so, that's the end. That's a dictatorial posture to take. And for me, others can have their views, but looking at this Constitution in the round, that kind of situation is entirely outside the boundaries of the constitutional order put in place. The other provision impinging on the powers of the Commission or anybody given power under the Constitution is Article 1, Clause 1. Let us always revisit that provision. It is the most important provision in the entire Constitution. It says, Article 1, Clause 1, the sovereignty of Ghana resides in the people of Ghana, in whose name and for whose welfare the powers of government are to be exercised in the manner and within the limits laid down in this Constitution. So all exercise of constitutional power is to be geared towards the interests and welfare of the people as the sovereign of the country. And I'm at pains to see how a sovereign power whose interests and welfare have to be served by all donors of constitutional power can be just dismissed outright. Oh, we've heard your, gone through your complaint, we've effected the corrections. And from social media, they are not saying they've corrected all, say most of them. And that should be the end of it. To me, that is running, to use an old expression, a chase and fall, as a chariot drawn by horses in the olden days, through the provisions of the Constitution. Nobody, and I want to emphasize, nobody has absolute power that detracts from the welfare and interests of the people under this Constitution. That's the central requirement. And I'm sorry, in Africa, and particularly in this country, over the years, people just look at power in absolute terms. I'm sorry. You look at the power conferred, and look at all the other coexisting provisions. They are relevant to the essence of your power. Now, let's look at Article 3, clauses 3 and 4. Well, this, because of your time factor, all they are saying is that every person now, all citizens of Ghana shall have the right and duty at all times. At all times. And that's at all times, anywhere, because time does not exist in the vacuum. It must be allied to a place. And so that's part of the at all times. And so every citizen, I want to emphasize that, every 3, 4. All citizens of Ghana shall have the right and duty at all times to defend this Constitution, and in particular to resist any person or group of persons seeking to commit any of the acts referred to in Clause 3 of this article. Now, let's forget about overthrowing the Constitution. But overthrowing the Constitution by any unlawful means, is there any unlawful means? Not necessarily by violence or anything. Anything that is not in line with the Constitution, any means.
And that includes going into an election with an electoral that has concerns?
Oh, sure. It's not a provision of the Constitution.
Right.
And as part of the plan, every citizen has the right at all times to defend the Constitution. That even is enough. The other aspects of abrogation or so, they are all part of the Constitution. So the time is constrained. Let's look at Article 41 of the Constitution, duties of a citizen. The exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations, and accordingly it shall be the duty of every citizen B, to uphold and defend this Constitution and the law. And so, I mean, you just don't look at people in their face and tell them this is what I've done and you have to take it like that. If it's not in line with the Constitution, they have the right to insist that you comply, because they have the right and duty to defend the Constitution and the law.
Now, with your experience searching through election petitions for that matter,
yes,
would an audit as based on what we are confronted with now, be one of the corrective measures to, as it were, satisfy all of these concerns and answer all the questions about the provisional voters register as exhibited?
Absolutely. Now, let me refer to Articles 296 296, exercise of discretionary power, where in this Constitution or in any other law, discretionary power is vested in any person or authority. A, the discretionary power shall be deemed to imply a duty to be fair and candid. Is that an instance of fairness and candidness? I raise plausible errors in the register, and you just tell me, oh, I've effected the corrections. Not even, or say most of them, and that should end the matter. And you say that's fair and candid? Anyway. Let's look at another provision relating to the power of the Electoral Commission. 51. The Electoral Commission shall, by constitutional instrument, make regulations for the effective performance of its functions under this Constitution or any other law, and in particular for the registration of voters, the conduct of public elections and referenda, including provision for voting by proxy. Their power is to make regulations for the effective performance of its functions. Now, what does efficacy? Is that an effective way of conducting an election? Serious discrepancies are pointed out by a commission which the public doesn't trust much. I don't know much about all this. I'm a lawyer. I don't have time for politics and all that. But what I do know from social media is that people, Afrobarometer says at least 1/3 of the people,
yes,
country don't have trust in the East.
So that's about 33%, I think. Yeah.
And I've read from social media that, I mean, from what they are saying, unless they are wrong, that the Constitution is mostly comprised of politically exposed persons. I mean, in the first place, the person who exercises that power to, if, I mean, he is mindful of the requirement that the exercise of the power shall be fair and candid, you don't go and bring your stooges to run a national institution.
Well, it is the president who appointed these commissioners.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that their appointment, I mean, is in the first place, is fair and candid. If it is true that most of them are politically exposed, is that a fair and candid way of, and should they themselves even accept those appointments? We are not serious. We can't be serious, and that's why we are suffering so much. People just enjoy the power without looking at the constraints hedging the power around. That's the African mentality. That's what results in Napoleonic state capture, dictatorship of the type of Mussolini, Stalin, and others. Very amazing that this day and age, all this constitutional journey since 57, we can retrogress like this. Very painful indeed. And others, look, when I was retiring, a lecture was organized in my honor. At the end of it, I asked whether I could say a few words. He said, well, I can just say one or two. And I reiterated Article 1+1, that at all times, everybody should be mindful of that provision, particularly judges. And that what would pain me is that some persons can choose that clause which enables them to come to power in the Constitution, and once in power, they seek to negate all the other provisions of the Constitution, and they will get people willing and ready to help them to do so. I couldn't continue. I said, thank you, I went and sat down. This is where we are.
And I sense that level of trouble and as it were the concern about the retrogression in our democracy that you talk about. I mean, what could be the possible implications of what we are faced with, as you have diagnosed, as Napoleonic situation of the state?
Well, your guess is as good as mine.